This is Neat and Mixed from Hops and Spirits.
We're back once again with another flight night. It's been a little while, but Brandon and I haven't forgot how to have a drink. And we've got a fun guest with us this week. He's the co-founder of Old Line Spirits, and he's going to talk to us about single malts. So welcome in, Mark McLaughlin.
Hey, thanks guys. Glad to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you, and for those watching, I'm Jonathan. Brandon's the other guy in the little toboggan, and Mark's, depending on how this will come out, will be the other guy. But Mark, before we get into all the questions and all that, we've got a pour. So let's start with that American Single Malt Flagship 95.
Yeah, I got a picture or a bottle shot of it right here for those who are watching, and that's what we're sipping first. Like you said, Jonathan, it's our American Single Malt whiskey at 95 proof. We call it our Flagship. You'll see a couple of Navy. We're Navy guys, so you'll see Flagship and Navy strength kind of scattered throughout our branding. And this is really this is the kind of entry point for our whole portfolio. I'm happy to talk about it, or just have you guys sip it and go from there. I'm going to pour myself some too, if y'all don't mind.
Absolutely.
What we're here for.
What was that, Brendan?
So that's what we're here for.
Oh, got it. Nice.
Now, as I said, Brandon and I are not big single malt guys. So we're going to take this as a learning experience.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, where Arch and I came into this whole thing is we came in as really lovers of bourbon, and we will always love bourbon dearly. And we set out with Old Line originally to make bourbon and rye for all the reasons that anybody would want to. They're phenomenal categories, especially being in Maryland, historically a rye-producing state. And we stumbled across, which I know we'll get into later, I'm sure, an opportunity to learn how to make single malt from a couple of gentlemen who were retiring, and that set us on this path. And it was, at first, the idea was a little bit of a shock to us. Like, hey, we set out to make bourbon and rye, American-style whiskeys. We're American guys. Come on. And then they were making this, Bob and Jim, the guys we learned from over at Golden Distillery, were making this amazing American single malt aged in virgin oak with no peat. And it hit all the notes that we love in a whiskey and just delivered them, in a very different way. So for us, this is like the single malt whiskey for bourbon drinkers is really one way to put it, we think.
Brandon, I saw you make a face, and it wasn't a bad face.
No, I am really pleasantly surprised. Like John knows we're not big single malt, but this is really good. I'm not gonna lie, that's really good.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's for us, one of the biggest challenges we have is the term single malt has so many connotations in consumers' minds. Even guys like you guys who know whiskey way better than the average person, there's that strong association, whether it's, people think of like peaty Islay whiskeys, which, I love for what they are, but that's not what we do. Sometimes the Highland malts are wonderful, but they're also like very, very kind of fruity and whatnot, which can be great when you want that. This just delivers in a totally different way, and it's the surprise factor and the wow factor is really cool. The challenge for us is that when it's sitting on the shelf, it's as an American single malt, this is hand-to-hand combat for us to actually get people to try it, and once they try it, we're off to the races. But that perception of, I may not like it because of my other experience with single malts, again, we're just delivering something so much different. But when we see people have that pleasant reaction that kind of surprises them, it makes our day. So I appreciate that.
No, absolutely. It drinks. I mean, it's just like you talked about how you try to bring those flavors of like a bourbon, right? And to hit that all those notes. It hits all those for me. The nose is really good. It's like anything you would get from a bourbon for me. A little bit of that oaky, fruity, vanilla, but that's well done. Well
Thank
done.
you.
Well done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think you'll like the
Yeah,
second
because
one.
it's not
I'm
overly
excited.
grainy or anything, which is what I feel like Brandon and I have had before.
Yeah, it's as far as why it's not. I'm sure. I have some guesses, but where you have some malts that are really grainy. I know that. I'm not the distiller. That's my business partner runs the ops department, and Jerry's our distiller. So I'm like the third guy who should be talking about this, not the first at Old Line Spirits. But when we make our cuts, I don't think we go quite as deep into what we define as tails. Might be a little bit of an earlier cut than other single malt distilleries. And along with that, I think you can get a little bit more graininess, and also just the age. Age takes a lot of that out. I mean, you see it with you see it with bourbons and ryes too, right? Especially ryes. That really kind of grainy and rye forward, which is great. Ryes can be kind of young and still be great, I think, but that does kind of soften over time with the aging.
Now, how did you and Arch meet? Was it in the Navy?
It was in the Navy, yeah. So we were both naval flight officers. So for those who are listening or watching who aren't familiar with the term, think of Goose in Top Gun. You're the guy that didn't have the 20/20 vision but still wants to be in an airplane. So we were the guy running the weapon system, navigator, co-pilot, that sort of thing. It was great. Did about 10 years active duty. Arch did about the same, maybe a little more, and then he stayed in for the reserves and retired. But yeah, we were flying the same plane, so we knew each other a little bit on active duty. We were, crossed paths here and there a little bit, and then when we both got out of active duty, went to the reserves out of Andrews Air Force Base. Actually, even though we were a Navy squadron, there was a small Navy contingent in Andrews. And when I was going to grad school, I flew, and he was, as an engineer out here, he was flying. So that's where we're in the same unit and became buddies. And to make it weirder, we end up living 3 doors down from each other in Baltimore City, within a block of 2 other guys.
And this is unbeknownst to each other, right?
I mean, no, that was one of the reasons I went there. So our buddy Ray moved there first. He used to fly with us. Then my brother-in-law. It's completely incestuous. My brother-in-law, who I knew from the Navy, ended up moving to the same neighborhood. Then Arch moved there because he knew those guys. And then I'm like, well, shit, I'm in too. So we all lived at one point within a block of each other. Now it's just me and Arch, but. Yeah. So anyway, it's we became friends after active duty, became much closer, and when the time came for me at least to make a switch I was an investment banker after the Navy for about 2 years, and it wasn't a good fit for me, and I was itching to do something on my own, and the whiskey thing was kind of calling, and Arch, I didn't realize he was kind of open to giving it a go as well, so we jumped into it together, and here we are. How was it 10 years later that we're still breathing, still kicking.
Well, and you touched on this too, that it was a chance meeting with some guys at Golden Distillery, but it's also where you guys were based for a good while in Seattle. So how did that trip to Seattle change everything for you?
Yeah, so it's another weird coincidence that, to your point, so, in 2014, I left my banking job and I was going out to a wedding. A Navy buddy of mine was getting married. I was the best man, so of course I'm going. And so I was quitting the job with the idea of starting a distillery, but have no concept whatsoever about how to start one. I just said, you know what, I'm not getting any younger. My wife is weirdly supportive of me doing this because she saw how unhappy I was with my old job. And she was, we're not living high in the hog, but she was able to, pay the bills for a bit while I kind of went on this fool's errand. And so I went out to Seattle for the wedding, and I remember Googling before I went. I knew there was a lot of breweries in the Seattle area from when I had lived out there prior in the Navy. So I'm like, maybe there's distilleries too. So I Googled Seattle distillery, and lo and behold, the same week I was going out there, the American Distilling Institute was having their annual conference in Seattle. So, well, hell, I'm going anyway. I'll just go a couple days early and shake some hands, figure out if I can figure out what step 1 is on this whole process. And for you guys probably know ADI, but for those who may not, it's an organization that really encourages the grassroots growth of the craft spirits industry. So really helping people, figure out how to get started to grow, kind of a rising tide benefits all, rises, all boats rise to the rising tide, excuse me. So great organization. And when I was out there for the conference, just kind of feeling pretty overwhelmed, realizing that I knew little. I knew next to nothing, and this really reinforced that I knew nothing. And I met a guy out there, just sat down next to me on a couch. He's in his 70s. His name's Bob Stilnovich, and just sat down next to me and started chatting me up. Turns out he's an Army vet from Vietnam, and I'm an Iraq guy. And within about 10 minutes, he's like, "Wait, what brought you out here?" And I said, "I'm looking to start a distillery back in Baltimore, and I don't really know how." He goes, "All right, man. Well, I'm selling mine. You want to buy it?" So immediately, I'm thinking, I just been doing M&A, so I'm thinking like, okay, this is a distillery. It's got to be a big thing. Okay, who's your lawyer? Who's your banker? Do you have any offers yet? And blah, blah, blah. And he goes, no, slow down. You're the first guy I've told. So he walked in the room because his distillery was 90 minutes from Seattle City. So he drove down to this conference knowing that if you want to market your distillery for sale, which he did, you might as well go to a place where there's a bunch of new guys looking to get into business. And he and his business partner, Jim Caudill, were looking to sell because Jim was terminally ill. And so it was just kind of, it was a retirement hobby for two guys that were doing this for fun in a barn, essentially, on Bob's property. And, unfortunately, it was time for them to kind of move on. And then Jim actually ended up passing away just about a month before we moved out there to apprentice in 2015. So it was a right place, right time, and I think for everybody. I think that I know Jim's family, they had enough going on with him being sick, so I think they were probably relieved that they could just kind of wrap this thing up and, get some cash out of it. And then Bob, was doing this with his buddy. Now it's going to be just him, so he doesn't want to do that anymore. He's 72, so they were happy, and then we were thrilled to have the opportunity to not only, buy the assets of a business, but to have the stock, and also, most importantly, to go out there and live in Bob's guest house for as long as we wanted. We ended up staying I was there like a month and a half. I think Arch was there for 3 or 4 months, just enough to be, enough to know to be dangerous. But we could have stayed there for a year. Bob wouldn't have cared. So it was a really unusual, unique situation that we kind of just stumbled right into.
So for somebody who's not been to Baltimore yet, I know, but I do know this. I know you guys do two things really well, and that's crab cakes and football. Talk about how the distillery landscape is in Baltimore, how hard that was to set up, get going. Because for me, I'm curious because we don't know, especially somebody that's been, but we're always excited to learn of all these different distilleries that are in different cities around the country. That are trying to get going, and of course that's why we do what we do here. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's Maryland is actually a pretty good state, as it turns out, to start a distillery, in our opinion, based on the legal framework is can sometimes be frustrating, but it is what it is. But it's pretty fair in the big scheme of things. The regulators can sometimes be frustrating, but they're doing their jobs. But generally speaking, they're fair. So it's really, we didn't know what to expect, right? And especially because, our DSP, our distilled spirits permit, is number 12 in Maryland. So I think I don't know if we were the 12th to open, but we were the 12th to get a license at least. And so really it was kind of like, ever since the days of, it being a big rye whiskey powerhouse, those all shut down or sold to, Kentucky distilleries, like Pikesville went over to Heaven Hill and things like that. So the whole landscape was kind of just shuttered for decades. I want to say Seagram's was probably the last guys producing rye here into like the 70s, maybe, if I had to guess. So it was really kind of starting from zero, and we had the benefit that we were not the first. We had a couple of distilleries that were kind of really knocked down some barriers for all of us, which is great. And then in the city of Baltimore, there are currently 4, of which we're one. So the big one that a lot of people know is Sagamore Spirit, making rye whiskey. They're awesome. Another one that's closer to our size, Baltimore Spirits Company, also making rye whiskey and some gin, and a couple of Amaros and things like that. Awesome guys doing great things. And there's one that a lot of people haven't heard of because they are deliberately very, very, very small. The first one's in the city. It's called Louthan, Louthan. That's like a father and daughter, really great people, making bourbon and probably some other things too. And they just, their goal is they just want to keep it small and make great whiskey. So there's only 4 of us in the city, and then there's maybe another probably 30 or 40 distilleries in the state of Maryland. For a small state, that's not too bad. And the dynamic's great. I mean, I tell you this, we all get along. I mean, of course, personalities are personalities, but it kind of like you see in the industry in Kentucky, from what I hear, and other places, that at the end of the day, people are competing, but they're doing it in a pretty gentlemanly way without very many sharp elbows, and really are. We get invited to events all the time from other distilleries, and we try to do the same. We have events here that we invite other distilleries, come on and sell your stuff. It's just kind of, who's it hurt? No one. And who's it help? Everybody. So that's really what we've experienced. And in the city of Baltimore, I mean, Sagamore being so big, they could easily have written us off and never engaged with us, and no one would have thought anything worse of it. And that's the exact opposite of what they did. They've always been, they're at a pinch if we need help. They're, encountering the same problems we're encountering, just bigger, but they have more people to handle it. So we have smaller problems with fewer people to handle it. So I really can't say enough about the environment. It really is fantastic. And this extends to when I go to other states for sales and stuff, like New York and Jersey and things like that. I always meet people who are willing to be team players. It's pretty awesome.
It's really cool. That's really cool to hear, because it's just, even like you said, even though you guys are competitors in a sense, but y'all bring different flavors and different products to the table, and at the end of the day, you get to raise a glass and toast.
100%. And even if we were competing like head on, I mean, well, if I don't play ball with another distillery, people are going to find them anyway, right? So like, even if I wanted to do that, which we don't, I'm not going to win that fight. So it's just on every level, just do what feels right, and what feels right is to be helpful. So that's what we do, and that's what most other people do too.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think that comes from, if you'll indulge a little tap dance here, because people actually had this. I was doing tours on Saturday here, and I was talking to somebody about the same general topic, and I attribute that to the culture of Kentucky and of Scotland. And by that I mean that, as you guys know, you live in Kentucky, that so many people are in the industry, and like, maybe you work at Wild Turkey and your brother-in-law works here and your sister works here, whatever. Like, yeah, you're competing, but you're all part of the same ecosystem. And I think in Scotland it's very similar. So I think that I think that culture, has ripple effects. So even though we're not in Kentucky, we're still, we look up to Kentucky to see, how it's done. So I think that goes to not just producing whiskey, but also just how to behave and how to treat one another.
Yeah.
Now, some of those Kentucky folks might be looking at you for how single malt's done. So can you tell us a little bit about what in the world is single malt whiskey?
Sure. Well, it's going to depend a little bit on where you are, but I'll say when you look at, because you'll have American single malts like we are, and Scotch single malt, which is most of them. But in general, the things that are going to be amongst whatever single malt, whether it's made in America or Japan or whatever, the big thing is that we only use one grain, which is malted barley. So no corn, no wheat, no rye, just malted barley. As far as the other elements of production and aging, it's going to vary essentially by locale, by country. And in America, what we've done, we being producers of American single malt, is we're actually producing a product that technically doesn't really even exist yet according to the government, right? So we're all making American malt whiskey, which is a kind of a broader category, a broader definition rather. But within that category of American malt whiskey, we as producers of single malt have come together as part of a group called the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission, which is to say, hey, here's how we all think we should define this category. So for us, the way it's been proposed, and we think it's on the 1 yard line of being approved by the government, is 100% malted barley. We can make our whiskey on a pot still or a column still, which differentiates it in some ways from Scotland, because a Scotch single malt can only be made in a pot still. We can age our product in virgin oak, like a bourbon is required to, or we can use cooperage. So Old Line chooses to use new oak, but we don't have to. So, and there's a few other, as far as distillation, as far as how high on the proof you can go, and barrel entry, it's pretty much the same as a bourbon. So it really is. It's what we're trying to do as a category is make it narrow enough where it's protected, but wide enough where people can get creative and do different things. And for us, one good example actually in Scotland, to be a whiskey at all, single malt or not, in Scotland has to be at least 3 years old. American single malt, just like bourbon or rye, could be aged today. It wouldn't taste very good, but it could. So, while Old Line is aging 4 to 8 years for the most of our stuff, if not long, nothing less than 4. We have the luxury of that. We've been at this for a while. But for the guy next door who's starting up, not literally, but somebody else starting a distillery, and they want to throw it in a little 5-gallon barrel for a year to get started. Well, we've been there. So we don't want to have that minimum age because we want more people doing this, right? Get more the merrier. Get them in there. Get them in there. So the category is designed to be accessible and just that right balance of protective, but also not stifling.
I like that. Now,
it really has gone well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there, Jonathan.
Oh, no, you're good, because I was going to say, as we keep talking, we should probably have some more whiskey.
Well, I just finished my drink, so I'm ready for number 2.
So
before I pour myself. Here we go.
Which is the Navy Strength 114.
The Navy Strength 114, yep. So what this is, a lot of people will ask sometimes, is it fundamentally, aside from the proof, any different than the 95? And the answer is no. It's the exact same juice out of the barrel. That's just proof to 114. We've experimented with, some distilleries, as will do maybe their lower proof stuff might be a certain age profile, and their higher proof a different one. And we didn't see any value in doing that. Doesn't mean that other people don't have their reasons, of course. But for us, it's the differentiation is certainly noteworthy, and it's that same blend of 4 to 8 year old barrels is what we use for both.
And tell people where Navy Strength comes from and why it's always 114.
So yeah, it's as with any old whiskey or military story for that matter, there's some truth and some fiction, I'm sure, and it's hard to see where the line is. But as we understand the tale, back when sailors used to get rations, typically of rum, maybe of gin, I suppose, on a ship, they had no way of knowing how strong it was, because back then whiskey and rum and whatever made it to market in a barrel, and who knows who was tampering with it or whatever. So there was no chain of custody. Like nowadays, you pick up a bottle and you see the proof and that's pretty much going to be it, because it's all regulated. So the way the sailors would try to guard against getting a watered down ration was to mix a little bit of it with gunpowder and put a match to it. And if it ignited, it was above a certain point, and if it didn't ignite, it was below. So that was their binary measure, right? They had no way of knowing. So the officers on the ship would get that rum or whatever proof down just to that bare minimum where it would still pass a test, but they want to stretch it out as long as they can. So if somebody somewhere figured out if they got it on board at 114, that would be Navy strength. It would consistently pass that sailor test. So that's where the term came from. You don't see it very often in whiskey. You might see the proof, like Old Granddad has a 114, for example. It's a really good whiskey. They don't call it Navy strength, I don't think, but we did it because our blue label, so this is our new blue label here, Navy strength, used to be cask strength, which we still do cask strength, but just in a different way. And Arch and I found that when we were drinking our cask strength, I love it at usually it's like 124, 125 proof, give or take, out of the barrel. But we found ourselves putting a little water or ice in it typically and kind of opening it up a bit. And we're like, we're probably drinking this thing around Navy strength anyway. We're Navy guys, and we love it the way it shows that proof. Let's just do that. And then we made our cask strength became a single barrel cask strength. So we have kind of a regular proof of the 95, a high proof of the 114, and then a little bit higher on the cask strength, which will be a single barrel, which is a single barrel, which is kind of fun too. So long answer to your short question. I apologize.
No, I love it. I learned something.
So I love the 140. This is my desert island for old line whiskeys. If I had to pick one that I just said, okay, you gotta pick one, that's it. It would be the Navy. It would be hands down. I love some other things.
I thought you weren't supposed to do that with kids. Pick your favorite. You're not supposed to
pick your favorite. That's right. No, I just did. Yeah. I got 3 kids at home. I can't pick one of them. But the whiskeys, I can do it. Yeah. The 114. I just I'm crazy for it.
It's amazing that they're the same, just different proofs. There's so much difference to them.
100%, and that's exactly to the conversation earlier. Like we saw no need to change the profile beyond the proof because there's just so much difference there already. Once in a while on the high proof, I'll get a little more of that, like stone fruit, maybe nectarine. It depends on the day. I'm probably getting a little bit of it now, but it all depends on, obviously you guys know, palate, whatever you've eaten that day, whatever. But having just had lasagna for dinner about 2 hours ago, this is now my palate is telling me that like peach iced tea I sometimes get, which is I think a combination of those tannins from the oak and then a little bit of vanilla sweetness and then that nectarine, as I call it. Sometimes it's like peach iced tea all the way. Sometimes I don't get that at all. So.
I mean, this smells really, really good to me. And I know it's the same juice as the Flagship, but it's proof that it's a higher proof, but I get more complexity, more flavors. I don't know if it's just a high proof with it or what, but
that's the goal. That's the goal.
My house is right in that 100, 110 normally. Which I love higher proof stuff if it's done well, but this is awesome.
The complexity is there, like you said. It's exactly kind of why we do it.
Yeah,
with that high proof.
You get the heat from the 114, but I also get subtle sweetness coming through. Kind of like a mellowed out old fashioned, without the bitters. Honestly, for me, I get oranges, I get berries, I get all kinds of stuff.
The guys at the bar the bar I'm sitting at right now it's not operating. We're closed on Mondays, but the Mark Old Fashioned it's just an old fashioned with Navy strength. It sounds like more than it is, but like, hey, make me a Marky, please. And it's just an old fashioned with this, and I just love that high proof old fashioned. And it's killer. But like you said, it's kind of a lot of the way there without anything else in it.
I mean, good work on that. That is awesome. Really
Thank you.
Really
Well, like I said, it's still messing with me because, like you said, it's the same recipe, same ages, but 19 points different on the proof scale, and it's a totally different flavor.
Agreed. It came out of the same vat, right? It's like we have a 3,000 gallon tank. That for anything that's not small batch or a barrel pick or whatever, or single barrel. Cast strength goes in that big 3,000 gallon tank. So it's just a matter of, we'll evolve a little bit over time, but I can almost guarantee that these two were pulled from that at probably almost the same time. So.
Now, forgive me if I missed this, but what's the age statement on? Is it the same as for the Navy strength? Or for the Flagship, it's all the same, just a different fruit?
All the same, yep. It's gonna be a blend marriage, call it what you will, of 4 to 8 year old. 4 to 7.5 now. We'll be emptying 8s here shortly, but 4 to about 8 year old, and it's the exact same. To your point, yep. It's pulled out of the same big vat. It's the juice is at cast strength. It's identical.
It's really good.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's we're thrilled, and the fact that we had Bob and Jim, the guys that we learned from Golden Distillery, whom we acquired, and then we mentioned, I think before we actually started recording, we talked about Middle West Spirits out in Ohio, with whom we do a lot of production, and the combination of like that first step from Bob and Jim, and they got us that was like the booster engine of they got us headed in the right direction with a little bit, a lot of energy. And then the guys at Middle West, the fact that they've helped us so much to take this from that level to then just get it to the next level. They've been awesome. So, I think we've made some good choices ourselves along the way, but we've had a lot of good guidance that we are enormously grateful for.
Well, and I was going to say, when people think of how stuff reacts in a barrel, sometimes you can kind of mask things with some things. With the single malt, how does that work? I was thinking of that as, we're talking, I was like, how does that work? I mean, obviously you don't have anything else in there. You know, it's just one malt. You know, like there's no real recipe. The recipe's probably with age and barrel and stuff.
That's a good question. You know, I don't think I've ever been asked that question in those terms. So I think that because we're using virgin oak, I think we're kind of in the same boat as, I'll just say a bourbon. I don't say rye because I think rye actually has a little advantage over other whiskeys on, like, you can have a great 2-year-old rye. I mean, yeah, I like it aged longer, but like really, I think rye can kind of come out fighting a little younger. Bourbon, I think, takes a little longer, like I'd say malt does as well. If we were doing second or third use oak, like the Scots, I think there's a lot less room to hide. I think that it's just going to be that much more difficult, or at least you got to play the game a little longer instead of 4 or 5 years. Maybe you need to go 12 or 15. But no, we've been fortunate. We're putting in really clean distillate. We used to do this in smaller barrels, which like a lot of distilleries do, and we moved away from that as soon as we could because the best product we get is out of the 53-gallon ASBs. But the way we were able to put out a product as good as it was in a 30-gallon or even a 10-gallon barrel for a period of time, because there's not a lot of time in a 30-gallon barrel. You got to get it out of there maybe 5 years, if not less. 10-gallon barrel, maybe 3, if not less. So you don't have a lot of time for oxidation to really fix some things for you. So you got to put really clean juice in. So I think using those small barrels forced us to really, honestly, like put in the cleanest distillate we could. And I think that just paid dividends, just having that discipline, I suppose, moving forward. But yeah, I don't think I really answered your question to a satisfactory level. It's a great question. I've never been asked before, but I think with the way we age, it's probably about the same as a bourbon. Like, it's got to be good, garbage in, garbage out. But we have a little bit more leeway than if we were using used barrels. Used barrels, then the kimono is a little more open.
Well, and like you said too, you're maybe doing a little cutting the heart out and those little things that you can control, pulling the right levers.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and and then some of this, depends on where you produce, but some guys will leave, most of the heads in, and that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world as long as you're willing to give it enough time, because that's going to be the most volatile compounds. They're going to evaporate off first. So, heads in your whiskey, as I understand it, isn't always the worst thing as long as you're patient and let the barrel and time do its thing. Those will evaporate on out, and we make a heads cut, but yeah, at any rate.
Now these are, correct me if I'm wrong, these are newer kind of flagships that you guys introduced recently within the last year. Okay, so kind of walk through like what was the change, what was the mindset, what you guys wanted to bring new to the market, or maybe you guys were just experimenting, playing around.
Yeah, no, perfect, great question. So yeah, to your point, we had I'll use the term white label, blue label for our 95. As we saw a minute ago, is a white and the Navy's blue. Our old white and blue label were 86 proof and cask strength, and so a couple of things. We were, as we mentioned earlier, we were kind of phasing out the non-53 gallon barrels. We still use 30s a little bit here and there to really good effect for certain specific projects, but for the most part, we're 95%, 98% of what we do is 53s. But at any rate, we were using them more. So when we made the jump from 4 to 5 year old 30 gallon juice to 48-year-old 53, we knew there was going to be a jump in profile. It wasn't going to be a seamless thing, and nor should it be. It was a big improvement. I love the old stuff, but it got even better. So we knew there was going to be that jump in profile. We wanted to do a brand refresh anyway. We were a little like our old brand, which looked very similar, but we just kind of wanted to spruce it up a little bit. And Arch and I, our old 86, we were like, I love it, but it's just not. It just drank so easy. We thought it could use a little more horsepower. So for all those things, we figured let's just do this all at once. So when we're making that jump in flavor profile, let's do the rebranding and let's bump that proof up. So we're not changing one thing a year, 3 years in a row. We're changing 3 things at once and making a clean cut. So that was kind of part of the mindset. As far as the high proof, we love cask strength, but like I was saying earlier, we kind of found ourselves typically, adding a little water, opening it up a bit so that Navy strength fit the brand, fit the profile we liked. And then that gave us now an opportunity but we still want to have cask strength. Okay, that's now a single barrel. And we do a lot of fun stuff with that. Like, the first one we picked ourselves, just me, Arch, and our distiller. Second one, our whiskey club picked, which was awesome. We're doing stuff like that where, like, we're going to try to get, like, probably some whiskey clubs in. Like, hey, we're not asking you to buy it. Just, if you want it, you can. But really, come in, help us pick it, and then tell your buddies about it, So it's that single barrel cask strength allows us to do some more fun engagement. But really, that was we knew these things were kind of coming, and we thought, hey, let's just do these all at once. And I'm really glad we did. I think that 95 proof, 86 was great, no complaints on it. But man, at 95, that drinks like butter anyway. It doesn't need to be any lower. And yeah, we're very pleased we pulled the trigger when we did.
And I think you made the best move from that, honestly. I'm sure the 86 proof is great, but honestly, just around here, you don't see anything that's below 90. You don't.
100%. Yeah, you see it in Scotland a lot. Scotland and Ireland, you see 80 all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't want that. So yeah, like kind of like we opened, we're American whiskey guys. So we see the Kentucky guys doing this at 90, 95, 100. That's kind of what we like to drink. So yeah, I agree. I'm glad we're in that range. It's just it drinks. The 86 was great. The 95. One of our brand ambassadors, he describes it as the Mary Poppins of whiskey. He's like, there's just no flaws. It's just perfect. It's perfect, like Mary Poppins. And not the words I would use, but for Jeff Lickman, it works. So I heard him saying it the other night up in Philly, and I'm like, all right, I'll repeat that somewhere for some.
Well, I'm sure
I like
if you
it.
drink enough of it, you'll feel like you're flying too. So.
What's that?
I said, I'm sure if you drink enough of it, you'll feel like you're flying too.
That's right, 100%. You might fall down a chimney, Who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
Might have some great Navy stories to share.
Oh yeah. Oh man. Get a few more drinks in me, and you'll get some of those.
We'll do that after we hit the stop button, but we're not there yet. So, you talked about this. The American malt whiskey category is so large, and you're pushing so hard to get that single malt to be recognized by the TTB. What's it been like to do that? And also, how have you seen the American single malt category grow over the years?
Yeah. So as far as the first part of the question, how has it been to kind of create a category? It's been, from where I sit, it's been surprisingly, what's the word I'm looking for? Collegial. I mean, like that I would have thought that there'd be, for every distillery, there's a new different opinion, and there is, but people have, generally speaking, been approaching this from a very similar mindset of what we think works and doesn't. Of course, there's a good example is, one of the last things that we had to decide on as a group was, would we want American single malt whiskey to allow artificial caramel coloring like the Scots do? And the Scots do it because they're using used cooperage with very inconsistent colors coming out of the barrel, and if a 12-year-old Scotch out of the barrel might look like a 1-year-old bourbon just because bourbon gets so much color. So for all the reasons the Scots want to add coloring, it doesn't change the flavor, and I have no problem with it. We don't do it. We don't have to. But the question was like, hey, should we allow that or not? I think Old Line voted that, yeah, sure, allow it. We don't need it, but someone else might want to. I think the vote actually went the other way. But like that was the only thing I can think of where it was even like a tweener on like, where's this going to go? Everything else has been largely pretty much accepted, and the guys that deserve, I think, the lion's share of the credit for that are the guys at like Westland Distillery and Westward and Balcones and a few others. Don't even forget here, Santa Fe Spirits. Excuse me, I gotta forget them, and a few others. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some important people that were really the ones that were doing this even before we were. And they really spearheaded the whole thing, and they did a really good job. So it's been great. And as far as the second part of that question, could you remind me what that was?
Just seeing the category grow.
Oh yeah. So it's grown. It's funny. I think when you look at it from like how many American single malt whiskeys there are out there on the shelf, or at least available, being distilled at distilleries in the U.S. I heard a statistic the other day, which I haven't fact checked, so put an asterisk next to this, but there are more distilleries making single malt whiskey in America than there are in Scotland, and I think I believe it. Now that said, the volume of single malt Scotch being produced is light years more than what we're making here. But there's a testament that people are doing it. I think most distilleries, in my opinion, are doing it as kind of the way a brewery would do a beer collaboration or something, or a beer release, like, hey, we're going to do this, such and such beer for the holidays, and then maybe we'll do it again next year. I think a lot of distilleries are doing it kind of in that, like, hey, we make bourbon and rye and gin and vodka, let's do a single malt too. And I don't mean to make that sound disparaging, not at all. It's just, I think, the reality of the way most guys are doing it. And then you have, so that's growing extremely rapidly. I mean, almost everybody who makes whiskey out there in America these days is probably at least tinkering around with the single malt. As far as the people who do it as their primary kind of reason for existence, like Old Line, I mentioned Westland, Westward, Santa Fe, Virginia Distilling Company, another one I should have mentioned. Guys like us and them who are doing this as like really all that we do, or 90% of what we do, is a much smaller group. And I'd say there's probably 15 of us, if I had to say, that fall in that category, maybe fewer. So that number isn't growing quite as rapidly. I think that's a function of it's still much easier to sell bourbon than it is to sell American single malt. I mean, it's not as easy as it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I mean, you could put out almost anything and call it bourbon and somebody would buy it, right? Of course, people get pretty smart pretty quick on what's good and what's not. So now the bar's higher these days, but I mean, like the startup guys, I mean, the guys in Kentucky have been doing this well for years. But at any rate, it's just it's a tough category, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, it's right now we're at the forefront of a category that's going places, and it's hard, but 10 years from now, hopefully I'm looking back and saying I'm really glad that we kept our eye on the ball. So as far as the category growth, I'd say it's very strong, but I'd say it's still, let's say at a busy liquor store, 1,000 people, I'll say 500 people walk into a busy liquor store on a Saturday in October to buy whatever. I'm lucky if out of that 500, I'm very lucky if one guy showed up because he needs American single malt. Like, they're there for bourbon or rye or scotch or truly or wine or beer or whatever the hell. And so like our category is trying to like jump in on that shopping cart somebody's already shopping for something else. You know what I mean? So we're waiting on that point, or pushing towards that point where you open that cabinet and you're like, oh, I'm out of ASM, got to go to the store, So we're not trying to bump anybody else out of the cart. We just want to jump in there with them. It's kind of the way we're looking at it. So.
Well, you are doing some pretty cool things. You guys are also a little experimental. You do some finishing, do some fun things like that. Let's go to our third pour, the sherry finish.
Yeah. So this actually is one of our, it's a little bit different brand, and you can see this is actually our old, this is the last bottle I think I'm holding in my hand, actually, this release, I believe. This is before we updated the labeling with the the jet on it, a little bit different. But this is our sherry finish. It's we call it our Double Oak series, and Double Oak, to me at least, connotes typically like Woodford Double Oak is 2 virgin barrels in a row. The TTB told us that American single malts weren't allowed to use the word finish, which doesn't sound right to us. But once you get a no from the government, making that no a yes is really hard. So we just said, you know what, we're not going to fight City Hall on this, and we'll just call it Double Oak. So for us, Double Oak is, hey, we're in one oak barrel and then another. Just one of them's new, one of them's used. So yes, this is. You have the Oloroso or the PX. Do you remember?
Brandon, what does it say on yours? Does it say sherry?
Well, it'll definitely be sherry. I don't know if it's the Oloroso sherry or the PX, what they sent you.
It says ASM.
Got it, map. So I'm pretty sure you have the Oloroso, which is the one I have right here, which is what we've done. So it's a kind of a medium dry, medium sweet sherry, for those of you who aren't too familiar with the sherry world. And sherry's been our longest running finish. It's the first finish we ever did. and it's kind of got the biggest following. We do other finishes as well. We do port and Madeira. Sauterne was great. A bunch of others, but sherry's kind of been like the granddaddy of the finishes for us. I think it's one of our best ones. That and the Madeira finish, I think, are both just killer in totally different ways. But yeah, and it's kind of hard to see here, but one thing we try to do there is, I don't know if you can see it at all there, but we try to put everything on the back as far as what's in the bottle. So if anybody's got questions for the mash bill, because even though it's a single malt, there is still a mash bill because there's different types of single malt. We use different types of malted barley, so how long it was aged, proof, and all that. So we try to put all the data on the back, just so people want to know, they can know. But it's a nice little whiskey. We love that sherry finish.
Yeah.
That's at 100 proof, by the way, what you got there.
Nice. That's what we love, transparency. We love it when there's any kind of special finishes or any kind of specialty blends that distilleries do. We want to see the stats on it. We want to see, all right, what's the age on it? What's the proof on it? All the details you can provide and be as transparent as you can on the label. I think that sets you above a lot of folks.
Well, I appreciate that. It's one of those things where it's actually easier too, right? Because when you think of we used to release something, it's like the amount of man hours we put into the old label that had all this flowery language in the back that no one cares about. I mean, I wrote it. I didn't give a shit about it. So why would you care about it? So all the hours, and the first one had a misspelling, by the way. Our first bottle had not a misspelling. We had it used the word compliments, but we did it as in I'm paying you a compliment instead of flavors being complimentary. Yeah, and one of our investors was like, hey, you guys know you did a misspelling in the back? I'm like, well, all right, Tom, we bought 10,000, man, so get used to it for a while. But so
you didn't want to go through that whole TTV process again.
Yeah, that's right. Or just spend the money. I mean, spend the money on 10,000 new labels, But so we've kind of opted toward it just makes our life easier. We tell everybody everything anyway, so why not just put it on the back? And it's funny, even as transparent as we are, it's gotten way better. But in the early years when we started this, when we first hit the market selling product under the old line name 2016. Definitely you see with a lot of hipster guys would it's like they were, because this is right after a couple of distilleries, I won't name any names, but kind of caught being a little cute with some things, and I'm not here to pass judgment, but it happened. So people were really primed to look for a trick. So I'd be sitting here and hey, I have a bottle, hey, and I'll get the whole thing, old line, we're out of Baltimore, bought this thing in the West Coast, learned, we produce out in Ohio as well, blah blah blah, but the whole time you're saying that, the person's looking at the back, and they just they're making these assumptions, and you can see oh, well, you're not making that. Well, yeah, we are. Well, it says Ohio. Well, I just told you. We go out there, and it's anyway. It was, people were so geared up to find somebody in a lie, and it's hey man, go to our website. It's all there. You can call me a lot of things. One thing you can't call me is a liar. I'll give you that. A lot of other things you can very fairly call me.
Yeah.
But yeah, the transparency. It's made our life easier. The only thing we don't do the detail on the back, just because it will vary a little bit over time as far as this blend of maybe it's X% 4-year, X% 7-year. It might change a little bit over time. So for the flagship stuff, we put a flavor wheel on the back, because. Yeah, I mean, we know that what we taste and what you taste, as we're different people, may not be the same, but for us, we're trying to communicate to a person who doesn't know what an American Single Malt is, at least get them in the ballpark. And the big thing for us here, the big thing is what's not there. We have smoke, 0, by which we mean kind of peaty smoke. So we want, if there's a person who doesn't like that and sees, oh, okay, So that was a way for us to communicate some things, but avoid that flowery language that doesn't really tell you anything.
Yeah. This is really good, and for somebody who does not, I'm really typically not a finished type of whiskey bourbon drinker, if you will. But this is really good. But I will say, single malts are a lot better when they're finished in sherry or Madeira or port. They're a lot better than what bourbon is. There's a lot of bourbons out there that try to do that, and it's not my thing. It's some people's thing, but not mine. I like this. This is good.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I do. I agree with you in that. I think single malts take to finishes really nicely. And I think I'm with you. I'm sure I'm sure if I thought I'd find a bunch of some exceptions to this rule, but in general, in the bourbon world, I lean towards non-finished. But yeah, and some of these come across different. Like one of the ones that it's a good whiskey, but the finish that we have that is probably on the lower end of my favorites is our port finish, and it's a great whiskey. People who love that kind of fruit forward, they go crazy for it. I think it's if it wasn't a good whiskey, we wouldn't put it out. But that one to me, for my personal taste, is like that's a little aggressive on the finish there, and it's kind of one of those things that people are they're like not for me, or they just go bananas over it. So I'm much more of like this sherry. I think comes a little more on the subtle side, subtly nutty, subtly fruity, and that falls into what I like to do for a finish. It's just that little bit of nudge.
Well, you intrigued me on when you said port finish that you all do one of those. If there is a finish that I do like when it comes to bourbon finishes, is port. Port's probably my favorite one. But I don't know if that's because you got so much complexity going on with bourbon, and it takes on that sweetness of the port. That kind of mellows everything out. I don't know, but I'd be interested to try your port. No joke.
I think we just shipped Tracy at Estes a bunch of samples, and one of them was probably the port. So if so, we'll have her get one out to you guys, so you guys can give it a go.
Wait.
And I finally did look it up. It is the Oloroso.
It is the Olo. That's what I thought. Okay, because the PX is coming out here shortly, but when we ship these out, I don't think we had any PX to send. But the Olos, that's the one that's been the tried and true all along. PX is a little sweeter, great, awesome. They're both, but the Olo has been the one we've been doing all along.
Yeah, we really gave Brandon a hard one on this one because he hates finishes for the most part on bourbons, and not a big single malt guy, so it was like a double whammy, and he passed.
I appreciate it. Yeah, this could have gone a lot differently. I'm glad that it did.
No.
And Brandon,
you guys are killing it. These three are awesome.
And you'll love this too, Brandon, because when we do reviews, we do the whole review. Yes, we might like the juice, but if it's $500, maybe we don't love it as much. So, Brandon, $65 for the sherry finish, $55 for the Navy strength, and $45 for the Flagship.
All day.
I appreciate that.
There's nothing to debate there. That's all day long.
Yeah, we wanted to price it where. I'm sorry, Brandon. I didn't mean to step on you.
No, you're good.
We wanted to price it where all right, it's tough. Malts are expensive to make. The grain's really expensive. But for us, we're kind of targeting bourbon drinkers more than we are single malt Scotch drinkers. So we made a definitive point to try to keep it in that range of that 45 to 65 range, where a lot of bourbon drinkers will be very comfortable. And it's at 45, it's a little tight in our margins, no big deal. At 65, it's a little more comfortable, but we're happy. And we want that to be not like a one and done. Like we want people to say, okay, I could spend money again and feel good about it, and feel like they're getting value.
Well, I think you're right, because a lot of times we talk about, would you get a second bottle of it? Sometimes it's like, This one's you're like, no, get two. One less trip, less gas.
I would definitely buy a second bottle of each of these. Honestly.
Good. Thank you.
Like, it's really good. Especially for the price point, like Don said. Like, that's a no-brainer. Because typically you see newer distilleries come in, they're trying to do different things. They're trying to be that like craft top stuff. But they come in at a really high price point, and sometimes they price themselves out, honestly. Which I get it because operational costs and all that stuff, whatever. But but you guys got to figure it out. From what I can see. That's awesome.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it was it was a deliberate choice to do it that way, to kind of, but we're pleased. I'm very happy with where we're at in the price. Like, I would not want to be a penny higher for what we do. I want people to feel like, holy smokes, like they would have paid more and they didn't.
Right.
You know, that's a much better feeling than, yeah, I paid $5 more than I want to do for that. Or, you know, I'd much rather have it be people feel like they're getting more than they paid for.
Right.
Yeah, I think they're getting great value because you talk about it. It's 4 to 7.5 right now. It's pretty impressive. You talk about your margins are close on some of them. You're still giving back to some veteran organizations. Obviously, that's close to you all, but why is it something you all want to do?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So yeah, we've you know, as you know, Arch and I are both vets, and as are a lot of our original investors. You know, we never went looking for money from friends and family, but when some of these guys we used to fly with heard we were raising money, we started knocking on the door. So before we knew it, we were like backed by, before we got some bigger investors, we were backed by a bunch of knuckleheads we used to fly with, which is great. It's awesome. So yeah, it's a big part of our DNA, not only our background, but just like everything we do. It's, you know, when you kind of at 22 join up and your entire first 10 years of your professional life is that world, you know, a lot of it sticks with you. So yeah, the Navy was the best thing that ever happened to me professionally. Yeah, so we do try to get back to causes, the veteran-based. We do a lot of support of other causes that aren't veteran-based as well, but really the veteran ones are the ones that we kind of resonate the most with us. And the one that we've been working with closest recently is Canines for Warriors, which, as the name suggests, you know, they train service dogs for veterans who are in need, primarily for veterans who are at risk of suicide. So their goal is to, you know, work towards zero veteran suicide, which is a very noble goal, we think. And they're great. You know, it costs like $50,000 or something crazy to train one of these dogs. And I believe they actually also take rescue dogs to do this. So it's kind of like a win-win. And we met these guys via a Marine Corps vet who was a friend of a friend who rowed a boat across the Atlantic, him and 3 other people, to raise money for, among other things, Canines for Warriors, back like 3 years ago. And then we met him as he was getting ready to do the same on the Pacific from Monterey, California to Hawaii. And so we were like, hey, this is great. This guy's, and he had never rowed in his life. Like he rowed across the Atlantic and trained, but like before that, he's like, somebody just said want to row across the Atlantic. He's like, all right, fine. So he got us onto this Canines for Warriors thing, and we just love the organization. We work with the Tailhook Association, which is naval aviation. There's a scholarship fund for children of naval aviators and maintenance crews who are in need. And I'm blanking on a couple here, but yeah, there's a lot of great. The Baltimore Station's a local shelter that for veteran men that are homeless, and it's recovery services for drug addiction and alcohol, and gets them on their feet and get some job training and all that. So anyway, not to go on forever, but we find a way. It's margins are tight. We're not profitable, but we didn't expect to be at this point yet, and we can find a way to do it, and it feels good to do it. So sorry for the long kind of rambling diatribe.
That's awesome.
Now, Brandon, you got any questions for Mark? Got him a couple pours in, so he might be an open book.
Yeah. I'll give him my ATM password.
Yeah.
There's not much in there, so joke's on you.
Well, I can promise you this: when I do make it to Baltimore, I'm going to definitely come by and check you guys out. Obviously, you guys got an awesome product. I really enjoyed everything, honestly. And as John knows, I'm pretty straightforward, pretty honest about my reviews of it. But you guys are doing something good, man. And,
thank you, Brandon.
And again, and thank you guys for your service.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm still, to this day, amazed that people want to sit here and talk to me for an hour, so I appreciate it very much. I really appreciate you guys doing this on your personal time.
Absolutely. John and I can do this all night long.
True. Now, I got one last question for you. Because you're going to launch a new product here in 2024. And I think is right up Brandon and I's alley. Old Line's 51 Rye Whiskey. Tell us a little bit about that. Teaser as we go out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, as you know, we focus on single malt. That's our swim lane. But Maryland being historically a rye producing state, there's a Maryland rye whiskey trail forming. And, we want to be part of that. And, we love rye and bourbon. So, having us make one, twist my arm. That was, it wasn't that hard. It wasn't that hard to convince us to do it. And rye whiskey, as you guys may know, is very tricky. Rye's a tricky grain. So we had no experience working with it. And we, I don't know if it was their idea or ours, but a brewery about a block away called Monument City Brewing, and they're awesome guys. We've been friends with them for years. And their flagship beer is called their 51 Rye IPAs, which is 51% malted rye and 51% malted barley, I believe. Or sorry, 49% malted barley. So it's more than half rye. And we said, maybe we just get some of that mash without the hops. And ferment it over here and distill it and just see what happens. And we did that, threw it into a little barrel, let it sit for a year or two, and just kind of got a feel for where it was going, and we loved it. So we ramped it up a little bit. It's still tiny production, but we've distilled it, I don't know how many times in 2023. Did a decent number of runs, but yeah, so it's coming along. We're going to release the first iteration of it out of a 30-gallon barrel here, I think in April. And it's really nice. It's just I love it because it's a high malt rye, and we're a malt whiskey company, and it's a collaboration with a great brewery, and it just all came together in a way that was like too perfect. So yeah, it's great. We'll have to get you guys a sample of that. It's gonna be very limited. It's gonna be just sold here at the distillery for the most part. I think we may put a little bit in distribution locally to get to a couple bars that we know, but really it's limited run, but it's great. So I'll be curious to see what you guys think of it.
Well, that sounds pretty cool, and I love the collaboration. And obviously, like you said, Maryland's a rye state, what it was known for a long time. So it's really cool to see that come out. And Mark, thank you so much for sharing some pours with us. Good stories. This was a blast.
Well, can I make one shameless plug too, which I always I've forgotten to do before, and I always kick myself. Is that Old Line, as of October, we actually can ship via a third party that we work with via our website. We can ship to 40 states. So if anybody is listening that wants to get their hands on a bottle, oldlinespirits.com, and if 80% chance, 40 out of 50 states that it can go to you. So just to shamelessly plug it, I just wanted to throw that in there. But thank you so much for the time, guys. This is a blast, and again, I can't thank you enough for giving me some of your time.
Absolutely. We've had a blast, so thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Find more from Hops and Spirits at hopspirits.com.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.